Good morning, students. Today we will start chapter 15, that is voice. Now, see, compare these sentences. The teacher punished the boy. The boy was punished by the teacher. Now, in the first sentence, the subject teacher did the punishing or is the doer of the action. So, in the first sentence, the action was done by the teacher. Okay. Doer means the person or thing that does the action. The verb punished is therefore said to be in the active voice. So, when the action done by the subject, then it is, then the verb is to be in the active voice, is said to be in the active voice. Now see in the second sentence, that is the boy was punished by the teacher. Now in the second sentence, the subject boy, here the subject is the boy, received the punishment or is the receiver of the action. So when the action is received by the subject, the verb was punished is therefore said to be in the passive voice. So, when the action is received by the subject, then the verb is to be said in the passive voice. And if the action is done by the subject, then the verb is said to be in the active voice. Now, when the subject is the doer of the action, the verb is said to be in the active voice. Means when the subject is the doer of the action, means when the subject is done by the when the action is done by the subject, okay, then the verb is said to be in the active voice. When the subject is the receiver of the action, the verb is said to be in the passive voice. So when the action is received by the subject, then the verb is said to be in the passive voice. Means when the action is done by the subject, in that case the verb is said to be in the active voice, and when the action is received by the subject, then the verb is said to be in the passive voice. So here the verb or the action is done by the subject. So the verb that is punished is therefore said to be in the active voice. And in the second sentence, the verb or the action is received by the subject. So in that case, the verb that is was punished is therefore said to be in the passive voice. Now see exercise 1. Underline the verbs in the following sentences and write whether they are active or passive. Now see, Hari is taught by his mother. Now Hari is taught means Hari here is the subject and he is the receiver of the action. That why it is passive voice. He will do the sums in an hour. Now here subject is he and the action is done, okay, by the subject or will be done by the subject. So this is active voice. Now the gate was opened by the guard. So the gate was opened by the guard, that is passive voice. Now the thief was caught. It is also passive voice. Okay, why? Because the thief was caught by the police. So it is passive voice. I see a dark cloud. Now here the action is done by the subject. So it is active voice. The cow is loved by the children. Now here the subject is the receiver. That's why it is passive voice. Okay. Now see, carefully study the following sentences. Active voice and passive voice. Children love gods. Sorry, children love dogs. So here the action is done by the subject. Here subject is children. So and verb is love. That is, here the action is done by the children. So children love dogs is active voice. Now passive voice, dogs are loved by children. Here dogs is the subject, but here the subject is the receiver of the action. So it is passive voice. Guneet opened the door. Here also the action is done by the subject, that is Guneet. That's why it is active voice. Now passive voice, the door was opened by Guneet. So here the subject is the receiver. That's why it is passive voice. The jackal followed the tiger. Here the action is done by the subject. That's why it is passive voice. Sorry, active voice. Now passive voice, the tiger was followed by the jackal. Here the subject is the receiver. That's why it is passive voice. Now one important note, that in passive voice we always use by. Okay, and the object in the active voice becomes the subject or in the passive voice. See, you see that in changing a verb from the active voice into passive voice, the object of the active verb becomes the subject of the passive verb. So, the object of the active verb, here the object is dogs. Now, it will become subject in case or in passive voice. Okay, so dogs here is object, it will become subject in passive voice. An intransitive verb cannot be turned into the passive voice because it has no object. As you know that in an intransitive verb means the action that cannot be passes over from the subject to the object, or you can say that intransitive verb has no object. Okay, so in that case it will not change into passive voice. Now see, the passive form of a verb is be, is, are, was, etc. plus past participle. The verb used in the passive voice is, are, was, etc. plus past participle. The passive forms of verbs in simple present and simple past tenses are given below. Now see, in active voice, if the verb is V1, take or takes or es, then in passive voice we will change the verb into am taken, is taken, are taken. Now if the verb is V2, that is took is V2. So in passive voice it will be was taken, were taken. Now active voice, passive voice. Now see how you will change active voice into passive voice. They like me. Now here like is V1, me. Now when we change this into passive voice, we will write I am liked by them. Me here is I. So we will write I and always use am with I. Now here like is V1. As I told you that if V1, if verb is V1, we will write am plus V3. I am liked by them. Mary helps Radha. Radha is helped by Mary. Now, as I said that in passive voice, the object of active voice becomes subject in passive voice. So, Radha is. Why is? Because here Radha is subject and it is singular. Is helped. Is helped. Now here verb is V1. Okay. Helps. So is helped by Mary. Gia cleans the shoes daily. The shoes are cleaned by Gia daily. Now here also the object will become the subject in passive voice. So the shoes are. Why are? Because here the shoes is a subject and it is plural. That's why are cleaned. R plus V3 by Gia daily. Now see, Anil took the pen. Now here took is V2. So we will write was. The pen was taken by Anil. Why was? Because here the subject is singular. So the pen was taken. Was plus V3 by Anil. Then the servant stole the earrings. Now here the object, that is the earrings, will become the subject, will become subject in case of passive voice. So the earrings were stolen by the servant. Now why we use here were? Because here earrings is subject and it is plural. That's why we will write were stolen. And here stole is V2. So we will write were stolen, that is were plus V3 in passive voice by the servant. So my dear students, you have to learn this table. Okay, active and passive voice, you have to write it in your copy and you have to learn this. It is very important. And always remember that in passive voice, the object in active voice will become the subject in passive voice, and in passive voice we use by. Okay, plus agent. Now see exercise 2. In the following sentences, change the verbs in the active voice into the passive, and the verbs in the passive voice into the active. So you have to change the sentences into passive voice, and if the sentence is in active voice, you have to change it into passive, and if it is given in passive voice, then you have to change it into active voice. Now see the first one. The cat killed a mouse. It is active voice. Okay. Why? Because here the action is done by the subject, that is the cat. Now how you will change it into passive voice? A mouse was killed by the cat. Now here, as I said that in passive voice, object will become subject in case of passive voice. So a mouse was killed. Why was killed? Because here verb, you have to see the verb. Here verb is V2. So the subject is singular, that's why we write was plus killed. Okay, was killed by the cat. Now the dog was beaten by a dog. Sorry, the boy was beaten by a dog. Now here it is passive voice. How you can recognize that? As I said that in case of passive voice, we use by. है ना? So by is given in this sentence. That's why it is passive voice. Now how you will change it into active voice? Now here a dog will become subject in case of active voice also. So a dog bit the boy. Okay. So in this way you have to do these exercises.